Hey guys, welcome back. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Welcome back to another gun store vlog where today we are going to talk about the open letter sent out by the ATF yesterday and their determination of what is now a firearm. This has direct implications on products such as the Polymer 80 and other related 80% receivers or frames. So if that sounds interesting to you, please stick around. That's coming up now. Now, as mentioned, the ATF dropped an open letter to FFL holders such as myself. This letter is available on the ATF's website, and I will leave a link down below. This letter was meant to clarify a rule change that happened back in August of this year, 2022, in regards to the broadening of the definition of what is now considered a firearm, frame, or receiver. Now, this is in direct response to the so-called war on ghost guns.
This is a ghost gun. This right here has ability with a .30 caliber clip to disperse with 30 bullets within half a second.
That has been raging on for the better part of a decade, starting in such places as California, with a case such as a guy who was selling 80% completed AR-15 receivers and 1911 pistol frames to customers who would then come into his machine shop and complete them and take them home as functional firearms. Now, he was indicted on charges of selling firearms without a license and also selling firearms to felons, because some of the people did end up having felony convictions. Now, those charges went all the way until 2019 when they were dropped due to the fear that if it went to trial, it would create legal precedent that would hurt the 1968 GCA, because there was not enough evidence to really portray the fact that he was breaking any rules, regulations, or laws. Therefore, they did drop the charges. Now, instead, 8 years later, we're hit with this doozy, which is a rule change and a broadening of what the definition of a completed firearm is, or related frame or receiver. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the letter. Now, it does start with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, is issuing this open letter to assist the firearms industry and the public in understanding whether a partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional frame of a Polymer 80, Lone Wolf, or similar semi-automatic striker-fired pistols has reached a stage of manufacture such that it may be readily completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to a functional frame, and is therefore classified as a frame or firearm in accordance with the final rule titled Definition of Frame or Receiver and Identification of Firearms, Final Rule 2021 R-05F, which became effective August 24th, 2022. In particular, the following addresses partially completed, disassembled, or non-functional semi-automatic striker-fired pistol frames or parts kits manufactured, sold, or distributed by Polymer 80, Lone Wolf, and others with the characteristics described below. We then go on to look at the characteristics. Applying the regulatory text of Final Rule 2021-05F, partially completed Polymer 80, Lone Wolf, and similar striker-fired semi-automatic pistol frames, including but not limited to those sold within parts kits, have reached a stage of manufacture where they may be readily completed, assembled, restored, or otherwise converted to a functional frame. This definition of readily applies to each and every classification of a partially completed frame or receiver under this rule, whether sold alone or as a parts kit. So back in August, when they were looking at this rule, they were taking a look at particularly the Polymer 80 lower pistol frame kit that were marketed and sold by Polymer 80. Now, in this kit, you had an 80% completed polymer pistol frame, not dissimilar to a Glock. And with it, you would get a jig and the tools and the instructions needed to complete the firearm and have a functional pistol. Now, in this country, it is legal for private non-licensees to manufacture their own firearms and not put a serial number on the firearm, just so long as it is being manufactured for that person's personal use and not being made with the intent to sell. Otherwise, if you're manufacturing firearms for the purpose of distribution and sale, they have to be serialized, and that person has to have an 07 FFL and SOT as a licensed manufacturer. Now, because of that, these 80% AR-15 receivers and these 80% pistol frames and 1911 frames have been very popular in the market, because it has been a way for people to easily get these firearms shipped to their home, and hobbyists like to tinker with things and manufacture their own firearms. And historically speaking, very few of these so-called ghost guns have actually been used in crimes. There have been some instances, but it's relatively limited compared to the broader swath of people who have actually legitimately purchased and completed these products. Now, this rule is basically saying, despite the fact that whether it comes with tools or parts or instructions, it is still considered a firearm if it is 80% complete. Now, 80% complete is very subjective. I don't know what now will be the determination on what is now considered a piece of aluminum or polymer or what is considered a firearm. Obviously, at some stage of manufacture, there has to be an idea of when it goes from a piece of raw material to a firearm. I don't know what that is. Maybe now at 79%, that is yet to be determined. Now, this is referencing the GCA. So the GCA defines what a firearm is. They are now broadening their interpretation of that definition put forth by the GCA to catch all these Polymer 80 and Lone Wolf kits into the same net. So if we look at the GCA, the Gun Control Act defines the term firearm as any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to, and that's the key point right there, expel a projectile by the action of an explosive, or be the frame or receiver of any such weapon. There's point number 2. Any firearm or muffler or silencer, and then it goes on to talk about destructive devices. So if we're talking about the GCA, we're focusing on 2 points here. What is a frame or receiver, and what is readily convertible? So if we look at what the definition of a frame is, regulation defines frame as the part of a handgun or variants thereof that provides housing or a structure for the components, i.e. the sear or equivalent, designed to hold back the hammer, striker, bolt, or similar primary energized component prior to initiation of the firing sequence, even if the pins or other attachments are required to connect such components, i.e. a sear or equivalent, to the housing or structure. So the basic raw frame, the housing of what holds all of your fire control components, is considered the frame of the firearm. Now, what is readily convertible? A process, action, or physical state that is fairly or reasonably efficient, quick, and easy, but not necessarily the most efficient. I'm going to read that again. A process, action, or physical state that is fairly or reasonably efficient, quick and easy, but not necessarily the most efficient, speediest, or easiest process, action, or physical state. That is incredibly subjective based on what is considered to be easy or the easiest in terms of manufacture. To me, it's not very easy to manufacture things like this. I'm not as skilled with these, but to a machinist, it might be incredibly easy. With respect to the classification of firearms, factors relevant to making this determination include the following. So we have very clear examples. Number A is time, i.e. how long it takes to finish the process. Again, very subjective. Is 3 hours considered a long time? Is 3 days considered a long time? Is 3 months considered a long time? I don't know. Ease, i.e. how difficult is it to do so? Again, very subjective. If you're putting a blanket ban on something or restriction on something because of how easy it is not easy for me to change the ignition in a vehicle. Okay, to a mechanic, it would be very easy. So whose measure of ease are we talking about here? I don't know. Expertise, what knowledge and skills are required? Equipment, what tools are required? Are we talking about a pair of pliers and a screwdriver? Are we talking about a full-on CNC machine? I don't know. Parts availability, i.e. whether additional parts are required and how easy they how easy they are to be obtained. Most firearm parts are very easy to be obtained. Whether additional parts are required, in all cases, an 80% frame, additional parts will be required to assemble into the firearm to make it functional. Expense, how much does it cost? So I'm very sorry for you that are poor. If this needs to be priced at a point where nobody can afford it to make it legal. So I guess. G, scope, i.e. the extent to which the subject of the process must be changed to finish it. Again, are we talking 80%, 75%? How much does it need to be brought to completion? How much does it have to be changed from the form it's in when received to be considered a firearm? So getting on to the analysis, it says there are many partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional semi-automatic pistol frames being marketed as so-called partially complete or 80% frames. The federal firearms statutes and regulations, however, do not employ such terms as 80% or 80% finished or 80% complete. These are merely terms used by some to market these items. They are not based upon application of the term readily in the GCA or Final Rule 2021-05F. So I find that interesting because in this country it has been long standard practice that 80% receivers have been perfectly legal to manufacture, sell, own, and complete by private non-licensed individuals. So I went to Google, as most people would, and I searched when did the ATF say 80% was legal? The very first search result I got back was from the ATF's website, actually. And I clicked on it and I found this. Are 80% or unfinished receivers illegal? It's a very good question. Receiver blanks that do not meet the definition of a firearm are not subject to regulations under the Gun Control Act. ATF has long held that items such as receiver blanks, castings, or machined bodies in which the fire control cavity area is completely solid and unmachined have not reached this stage of manufacture, which would result in the classification of a firearm according to the GCA. Just give me a minute here. I prefer to chew them so that the pain lasts just a little bit longer. Now, if you guys are as confused as I am at this point, welcome to the club. Now, we're looking at two different products here in this statement from the ATF's website. It seems to be addressing AR-15 lower receivers that are an 80% portion of completion versus the Polymer 80 or Lone Wolf pistol frames. Now, the important critical piece that they are scrutinizing here is the cavities on the interior of the frame or receiver meant to house the fire control parts. In an 80% lower receiver on an AR-15, these cavities are left unfinished. You have to ream or mill them out. Now, it actually does go on to say at the bottom portion of their analysis in the open letter, on the above mentioned partially complete pistol frames and products manufactured by Polymer 80, Lone Wolf, and similar partially complete frames used to assemble semi-automatic striker-fired pistols, the critical area of the frame are the front and rear fire control cavities. The front and rear cavities are critical because these areas provide housing for the sear. As further explained and illustrated below, there are a bunch of pictures. Removing or indexing any material in these critical areas or completing or indexing any of the pinholes necessary to install the sear are therefore crucial steps in producing a functional frame. So I guess the distinction here between an 80% AR-15 receiver as assembled is the internal fire control cavities are left completely solid. On the cases of the Polymer 80 and related products, the internal cavities of the frame have been, the polymer has been removed, and the ATF is identifying that as a crucial step in manufacture that cannot be there. My assumption based on looking at this is if the Polymer 80 pistol, the polymer pistol were solid, where the internal cavities of the frame were not milled out of it, then it would be okay. But I guess that is left to be determined. So I guess that would be the difference there. As far as I am aware, contact your attorney. The 80% AR-15 should be fine because those internal cavities are still left solid. Well, guys, that is all the time I have for you today on this. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know by hitting that like button. Please also consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when I am posting new content. I'm going to leave you guys off with that. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.